we're here today to talk about developer experience, developer education, and how we feel that when those two are combined, that leads to developer empowerment. So this morning, in the keynote, James Waters referred to the 2019 State of DevOps Accelerate report. And in that report, he mentioned all the different ways that elite performers have a higher level of software delivery performance than their peers. What strikes me about elite performers is that they're twice as likely to meet their organizational performance goals. Another thing I noticed reading that report is that employers with more than 5,000 developers in their IT organization generally are a little bit slower than some of the smaller organizations. So one of our goals in trying to empower our developers is to try to move into that elite performers group and move into that speed. And how we're doing that is on our team, we have a goal. Our goal is that a new engineer at Liberty Mutual should be able to deploy an app into the cloud on their very first day on the job. And that's been our goal for the last few years. It's something that we're continuously working on and we're continuously working towards. And we're here to tell a little story today about where we've gone with our experience and then how we're moving into making sure that we have the education to back that to really empower our developers. But who the heck are we? So my name's Miranda. I am a solutions engineer at Liberty Mutual. I've been at Liberty for about 14 years. I've tried a variety of different roles. The majority of my career has been in the software developer job family, although I did do a Pivotal Labs experience where I was the product manager, worked in a product owner role for a little while coming out of that, moved into engineering management, and this year I've transitioned back into a technical role. And my passion within our secure DevOps platforms team is to help try to close some of the educational gaps between the tech that we're learning just through, going online, and then how to apply that tech using our tools and platforms.
My name is Matt Ruel. Like Miranda, I'm also a member of our platforms enablement team. I've been writing code as long as I can remember, so I'm really a developer at heart here, but played different roles within the software development space. Most recently, I have a bit of a passion for developer experience and trying to help make life better for all of our developers and make it easier to deliver software within the corporate environment. Coming from a small company, that was a bit of a culture shock to me personally, so it's just something I feel pretty strongly about, making better for everyone else. More recently, have been getting into the security side of things, which is a bit of a unique challenge, trying to combine security, being a security architect with playing that developer advocate role. I think it's a unique opportunity. A lot of companies are kind of gapped in that area. So I feel pretty strongly about that, but there's a lot of work that we have to do in that. So we both, like we said, we both work for Liberty Mutual. Tell you a little bit about the company. It's a big company, 50,000 plus people, close to 60,000, I believe. 5,000 of those in the technology space. A good majority of those are developers, which raises some interesting challenges, of course, when we talk about acceleration and IT transformation. There's a lot of people that you really have to get rallied around some ideas into some culture change and some new skills. So, kind of with that in mind, I'm sure a lot of you guys in the room are also going through a IT transformation of sorts. Ours is, I'm sure, very similar. It's all about really the ultimate goal of accelerating our delivery of business value, all about trying to keep up with a changing market. Like it or not, the world is changing around us and we have to adapt to that. So in order to make this happen, in order to accelerate our delivery of business value and our delivery of software to the cloud, we have to empower our developers. Learn that very early on in the journey here is that first and foremost, you have to put the right culture and the right tools in place and the trust to empower your developers to get that job done. So that starts with, culture change, like I mentioned, embracing a DevOps mindset, both top down and bottom up, coupled with adopting a cloud native tool set. So we can debate all day about which one comes first, culture or tools. You need them both, right? You can't really solve this problem without both of those. So we've invested a lot in both sides of that coin. That gets you part of the way there, the culture, the tools. You still need to put something in place to really improve the developer experience. If you can't just have an assortment of tools and let developers throw everything they have at it to get the job done. You want to streamline that process and make it as easy as possible and as delightful as possible to be able to deliver software in that environment. So it's about developer experience, gets us another large portion of the way there, and then it's about looking at where we are, where we're gapped, trying to meet people where they are and providing educational opportunities to optimize our, a diverse community of developers within that environment. So it's really a balance there. So it's all about putting developers in a place to get code from their laptops to production as quickly and as securely as possible. It's not just about speed, though. We work in a pretty highly regulated industry, so we can't just put software in the cloud without worrying about security and compliance and safety and all that sort of stuff. So on the platform enablement team, one of our big jobs really is to build as much of this into the platform as possible, allow our developers to focus, put their head down and focus on getting business value delivered, while our platform and our pipeline really provide the underpinnings of a lot of the security and compliance requirements. It's not all entirely possible with the platform. It's a shared responsibility, right? But we're interested in making all of this happen. And like I said, of course, trying to make sure that our developers are happy and enjoying the use of our platform. We all know happy developers write good software, something like that, right? So with that in mind, I'm going to take you through a little bit of a story of our developer experience journey. It's been a long time here. Don't worry, we're not going to go through the entire history. It's not a history lesson, but it's been, from what I hear, it's been going on for about 10 years. I haven't been with Liberty that long, but if we go back about a decade, Miranda was more involved back then. We stood up our first continuous integration platform, and that was really just sort of planting that seed, whetting our appetites, making us want a little bit more. But it was really just the beginning. We were doing stuff before that with our first enterprise platform that really tried to tie it into a lot of the rules and regulations that we have to follow, is when we really started to kind of unlock the doors there and make it possible to deliver software through a continuous integration pipeline. So we moved on from there. We started adding more static code analysis, code reviews, some of the basic necessities that developers need to deliver secure software through a pipeline. We started to automate deployments from this platform, and that was sort of the beginning of our DevOps journey. Going from there, I guess it wasn't until we introduced the PaaS environment, and coupled with Spring Boot, that we were able to turn the corner to really start accelerating our delivery. We were doing it well in pockets. We had some teams that were doing well, some teams that maybe were stuck in some of their traditional processes, right? We talked a little bit about culture versus tools, right? Have you ever tried to do microservices on WebSphere? I mean, it really wasn't until we had some of these right tools in place that we could realize some of these things that we were promising, right? So the pivotal Cloud Foundry environment, Spring Boot, kind of began our love affair with Cloud Foundry and Spring Boot there, and started to unlock some new opportunities. So moving on from there, still wasn't perfect, right? We're moving fast, but it's still kind of hard to get started. We're getting good at delivering some of the basic hello world, easy path, happy path applications to the cloud, but you got people joining the company all the time. We've got different, the 5,000 people in technology I talked about that come from diverse backgrounds and skill sets and all that. We still had a lot of tickets and a lot of friction in that process, right? So we paired up with Pivotal. We did a Pivotal Labs engagement building out our pipeline provisioner is what it was called back then. If you take a look here on the left side is sort of the early stages of that pipeline provisioner. On the right is a few years back looking at that when it started to evolve into what we now call our developer console. Not a lot of detail to see here, right? But what I just want to show you is that we built this UI to kind of abstract a lot of the complexity of setting up these pipelines. And we started to offer some self-service in setting up the build and deployments.
But yeah, the big point of the console and showing our experience is we were trying to enable as much self-service as possible for our developers, because at the time, one of their biggest wait times was waiting for a build pipeline to get built. So for them to be able to go into this console, get a pipeline that was going to be able to build their application, store it in the artifact repository, and then automatically deploy it out to our PaaS platform, that was a huge enabler for them, and that's what got us to being able to take an app from source code to production in about 15 minutes around that time.
Kind of moving on from there, we talked a little bit about the happy path. We got pretty good at delivering those basic applications to the cloud. And we started to realize the feedback we're getting from the development community and some of the points of friction and pain that we were hearing about just didn't completely add up with what the capabilities we thought we were providing, right? So a little bit, it's about going out and talking to your development community, talking to your users, engaging your customers, listening to their feedback and figuring out what's holding you back and trying to look at the holistic experience. Just pushing a piece of a Spring Boot app through a pipeline that's entirely just reliant on the pipeline and the Cloud Forge stack was just part of the picture, but when it ties into databases and other, we get into AWS and Azure and the hybrid cloud and multi-cloud environments. So we have dependencies across silos in our organization with cybersecurity and other teams. We found that we weren't really looking at that holistic experience. Yeah, I think so. So we formed an Agile team of teams that was looking at our journey to the cloud and some of these points of friction and how can we continue to improve that process, right? And we engaged with the enablement teams and tried to break down some of those silos behind the scenes and really, I guess, throw a little bit more energy and investment at solving some of those problems. So like if you can automate getting your application to the cloud, but there's no security on it, that doesn't get you very far, right? You get your application deployed, but then you have to wait a month to turn around tickets to get things set up with DNS and identity and all that sort of stuff. So what we're able to solve is start to build a lot more of that automation into the pipeline by engaging every part of the IT organization in the process.
And at this point, we're looking at how can we try to build more, like thinking about when we're releasing a product, trying to have a global first approach. So as we're starting to build our apps, trying to think about how can this run in our global environment and how can we take that into account, and that's kind of where we're going in our DevOps progression.
All right. I was talking about a second ago, we're picking back up now finally.
We got
I was talking about this.
We're back.
The concept I was talking about a bit ago is the value stream alignment, right? Developers pushing code to production, pushing business value. How do we tie that into all the different enablement teams in a company of our size, right? So that was that value stream alignment that we were talking about. And then from there, that kind of brings us to the current day. And some of the things we're focusing on now is really around some of these more complex patterns that we're talking about, right? Is how do we make sure that every developer in our company around the globe is able to deploy to the cloud at speed and with confidence. So we're looking at expanding to support all these additional patterns and providing more of that global resiliency. So moving on from there, where are we on our journey? We're able to achieve a lot of acceleration here, right? I don't have any hard numbers up here, so you can't beat up on me too bad about that. But we were able to get things that took weeks or months and compress it down to days, even minutes, right? We can deploy an application to the cloud inside of half an hour that previously took months. So developers are happier. We have a lot more automation and self-service. And it's cool, but we still have work to do, right? There's still a lot of work ahead of us. Things are changing all the time, so we have to stay focused. So some of the things we learned along the way is about catering to the beginner. Miranda said early on, we try to make sure that a new user joining the company can get an application to the cloud on day one. That isn't as focused on that new user as it sounds like. All of us are beginners in some way, right? So everything we do to help that new user get to the cloud is going to help somebody with 10, 20 years experience who's retooling a bit and learning some new technology. So focusing on being a beginner, always being a beginner yourself is a valuable part of the process. And then don't make assumptions about skill sets. We can do all we want to provide an ultimate developer experience, what we want our developers to do, but we have to reach out and find out where are you gapped, where do you still need help, and that ties into some of the education that Miranda's going to tell us a little bit more about.
Sure, so focusing on the developer experience alone, it just hasn't been enough from what we've found. So we did a user research study over, I believe the study period was about 6 months. And through those 6 months, we gathered 157 points of data. And we synthesized that data and drew it down to what is the root cause for our opportunity areas. And when we looked at it, 68% of those data points all pointed to knowledge as being our next opportunity area. And this is an example of some of the data that we're hearing. So we're out talking to developers. We have a survey that goes out every few months, and this is some of the direct feedback that we're getting. So there's still a lot of assumed knowledge in our pipelines. Teams would like a little bit more training as they're learning how to take their applications and migrate to the cloud. And then the process for setting it up, people aren't sure, like, is this following the most current standards? So we believe that by adding in a focus on education, we can get to that true developer empowerment. Liberties, from as far as I can remember, I've always felt this complete, continuous learning environment. I've had training available to me. Oopsie daisies. All right, we'll go with it. So I've had training available to me, that type of training. We have tuition reimbursement. We have online classes available. We go to conferences. And we've had guest speakers that have been coming to our offices. On this slide, we talk about Richard Schroeder coming to talk to us about the layers of cloud abstraction, which is one of my all-time favorite talks. The problem with that type of training is that you learn about the specific technology, but there's this gap between that technology and how to apply it using our own tools and platforms. So something we've started to focus on is how can we focus on having more immersive learning opportunities. So this year we ran our 5th company-wide hackathon, and with that hackathon we provide some pre-event training. We talk through different options and different tools available to our users. And with that hackathon, that was one of the first ways that we got Git as a preferred source control tool out to all of our developers. So many developers hadn't really had the opportunity to use Git within their own teams. So this was their way to try it out, experiment with it, and now the majority of our developers, or all of our developers by 2020, will be using Git. We've also taken that a little bit further, and we're involving our interns now. So every summer, all of our interns have the opportunity to participate in a hackathon. So they're starting out their first year being able to try our tools and technologies. And some of the solutions that we've found, they're really production ready. We have a technical excellence award that's part of all of our hackathons where we look for best coding practices. We have we look for like how complete are the test cases, how complete are the solutions, what type of data are they bringing in. And it's just been incredible to see how those solutions have changed from the very first hackathon all the way up until the one we ran this year. Another immersive experience that we enjoy are pivotal Dojos and labs engagements. That's okay. So we've started doing our labs engagements and our Dojos a few years ago, and it's really an opportunity for us to make it real. So we have experts coming in, they're teaching us about our processes, they're teaching us how to work in different ways using XP, using test-driven development. But the best part about it is that we're solving real business problems through those engagements, and that's been a very high impact, and we've been able to spread that knowledge throughout the organization. Our Women in Technology organization, our internal Women in Tech group, we've also put on a bunch of coding sessions. So these are sessions that run for a few weeks. It's maybe one lunch block once a week. And we've gone through different technologies, like we've gone over CI/CD pipelines, we've gone over Internet of Things, we've gone over using a NoSQL database, we've done GraphQL, and we've done Node.js. And all of these sessions, they're actually running on our tools and platforms and available for all employees to go and follow those instructions, even if they don't participate in the original session. We're almost done. Yeah.
That's right.
This year we also started up a Deep Racer League. So that's been a fun way for developers to learn about reinforcement learning. So reinforcement learning means that there's no data necessary to get started. All of the data is collected during actually trying things out. So you basically write a reward function to show what you want the task to complete. And then by interpreting all the different data that the camera has on the front of the car is raced around a track, and based on your reward function, they'll learn the car learns on its own how to actually drive around that track. So we've got about 270 people participating in that right now, and that's global. Our most important, and the one that hits closest to home for me, is we've redone all of our entry-level curriculum for our technical employees. And based on the feedback that we heard over the past few years, they had the same problem where they were learning the technology, but they weren't learning how to build it and use it within our Liberty framework. So within their first technical training, they're actually building out Spring Boot REST APIs, they're deploying them to Pivotal Platform, they're connecting them to real databases running out in AWS, and they're going to see the best practices for how to deploy those types of apps. And how we did that was we talked to developers across the organization, and we asked how they were doing things. And we asked them, how are you setting up these types of apps? Which type of NoSQL database are you using? And based on all of that feedback, we put together a curriculum for those new hires. And they're actually going through training right now. So I'm excited to see how this second round of training is going. So back to our goal, these are all different ways that we're working towards having an engineer be able to walk in the door at Liberty Mutual and be able to deploy out to the cloud in the first day.
So wrapping it up here, talking about some of the things that we learned along the way, just reiterating some of the important bits from our story. We learned to focus on the holistic developer experience, not just a small portion of it or the portion of it that impacts our team, but rather like what is that developer experience on a day-to-day or week-to-week as they try to deliver software, and how can we make that whole process better. Developer feedback is critical, in as many ways as possible that we can to reach out to our developers along the way here, not just surveys, not just on Slack, not just on a little feedback form on our website when something goes wrong, but collect as much feedback as possible and use that to shape the strategy of our platform. Automate everything on the path from code to production as much as possible, right? It's got to be, we talked about it earlier this morning, it's all about developer self-sufficiency these days. If something requires a ticket, it's not real. And if it's not automated, it's not real. That's kind of the point we're getting to now, is everything has to be automated along that journey. And finally, culture change is hard, but empathy makes a huge difference. So really step into the shoes of your users and try to understand what they go through, a day in the life of a developer, right? Get into the trenches with them and try to solve those problems, work with them, experience it, feel it, and then take that back to your own team with those ideas on how we can, draw some insights from that to really improve our platforms to meet their real needs.
So speaking of which, thank you so much for being empathetic with us today with all the tech issues. The slides will be available online. And if you have any questions, shout them out. Yeah.
Was there an aha moment for you where, I know you had a training program already, but was there an aha moment where you were thinking, okay, this needs to be more immersive, and this is how to be more powerful, that kind of program?
Sure, so the question was there an aha moment where we realized, based on our feedback for our entry-level training, that we needed to make a change? And yeah, so that happened last summer, I believe, as the last round of training was wrapping up. They looked at that feedback, they looked at the feedback years past, and they realized, having the training happening just on the technology, but not on the processes that we use, it was causing a lot of stress and a lot of confusion coming out of the training, and the teams were leaning on their technical mentors within the organization to basically learn all of that. Just go ahead.
Would you release the questions and maybe the results of that survey that you performed to find out that there's a knowledge gap?
So the question was, are we able to release the questions and the user research that we did? So probably not. And the reason why is that it was done through working with 3 different teams over the period of 6 months. So it was a lot of in-person interactions. We can see if there's a way to distill it down, and let me know if you're looking for anything in particular, and we can try to see what we can do about that.
As part of your guys' solutions engagements with a lot of your dev teams, how are you guys identifying kind of team-specific training opportunities with them? Do you have a model of needs, or how do you figure out kind of what they should do?
All right, so the question was, as we're working with different teams across the organization, they have lots of diverse perspectives and skill sets. How are we identifying what the training opportunities are? So for our entry-level training, what we did was we set up a tech advisory board where we had developers and architects from all over the organization working on different teams. And we talked together about what would be the most beneficial training as like a base level foundation for employees that would then go out into those teams, and those teams would help train them for their specific tech stack or their specific, they're gonna need to learn the domain knowledge of that business area as well too, so that team does take on that portion of the training. You're welcome. Yep.
You mentioned self-service quite a bit. Do you guys build apps that enable that, like the pipelines and stuff?
Yeah, the question is, for self-service, did we build apps on top of the pipeline to be able to enable that for developers? Yeah, absolutely. I think putting just the vendor products and the pipeline tools in place gives us some of the underlying capabilities, maybe the APIs or some maybe more complex ways of solving the problem. But until we abstracted that and put some tooling on top of that and really, I guess, hit a lot of the underlying operations from the developers, it was still a bit difficult to get started, and that's where I think it relates to trying to cater it to the needs of all your developers, not just somebody who likes to configure pipelines through YAML or through JSON or whatever, you know what I mean? So it was really until we started building out that developer console, we didn't really see the full acceleration other than certain pockets of applications that were maybe a little bit more mature.
All right, thank you.
All right, thanks a lot, guys.